It is time for us to return here on Mic'd Up with Jake and Fulton, but just Fulton for this first show back from the holidays. Jake is wrapping up his holiday plans and his holiday travel. He will be back with me tomorrow. So that's just the first team scheduling note for today, is that it is just me today. Fulton with you. Jake will be back tomorrow. He's wrapping up his holiday weekend, as I hope that all of you had a fantastic holiday weekend celebrating Christmas. If you do, having a good time with hopefully some friends, some family, some loved ones. Whatever you did over this holiday break, I hope you had a tremendous time. Lord knows I did. I got to see my parents, my family, got to see some friends I hadn't seen in a long time. That's what I did, is I spent my weekend back home. I hope the rest of you had a great holiday weekend as well. We have a massive amount to get to on today's show. We will probably not even be able to get to all the news and notes from over the Christmas and holiday weekend today. So if there's anything we don't get to today, don't worry, we'll get to it tomorrow. But we have so much to get to from the NFL today here on Mic'd Up. We're going to look at the Chiefs and their win over the Seahawks. Their first, in my opinion, stress-free win in at least a couple of tries, as they defeated Seattle over the weekend in Kansas City. Was able just to be a pretty much low-key win for the Chiefs, and arguably the best defensive performance in quite some time for Kansas City. So we'll look at that win as well. We will go around the NFL in the 1 o'clock hour. There's a lot of NFL news and notes to get to. There were some big games and big wins for certain teams. There's two very important things I want to get to, though. And yes, one of them includes, folks, it finally happened. It took giving up 51 points to the hapless Baker Mayfield-led Los Angeles Rams. But Nathaniel Hackett has been fired as the head coach of the Denver Broncos. He is gone. He is ousted. He is see you later. The Denver Broncos will now be searching for a brand new head coach, which, fun enough, their first matchup without Nathaniel Hackett against the Kansas City Chiefs coming up here on Sunday afternoon. So we'll get to the firing of Nathaniel Hackett. We'll also get to a little bit of discussion of the NFL and concussions in the Tua Tagovailoa situation, as that situation has gotten even worse after the match between the Dolphins and the Packers on Christmas Day. With that, we'll preview some Big 12 hoops. Conference play for Big 12 basketball begins on Saturday. And I just want to look, as we wrap up non-conference play, at exactly how great this Big 12 conference is and how much of a great season we can be set up to be prepared to see in the Big 12 this year, looking at all the different metrics and what have you. So we'll look at that coming up here in the 2 o'clock hour as well. We'll play a little odds makers in the 2 o'clock hour. Dan Lucero, he'll join me at 1:30 for CrossTalk, as Dan and I will chat it up a little bit. We got Everyone Loves a List. And then, of course, it is Tuesday, so Matt Derrick will join us as our Herman's Meat and Smokehouse Chiefs insider at the bottom of this hour. As always, you can hop in on the Big O Tires text line, 785-272-9429. It's just me today, so your interactions is welcomed even more than normal. We already love when you all text in and join in on us, but when it's just riding solo, we love it even more. I get more chances to chat it up with you guys and not be stuck with chatting it up with Jake. It's a little bit different, a little bit of a different vibe. You can also check us out on YouTube, Sports on 580 on YouTube. We're live streaming it like always. You can hop in the comments sections as well. Just two of the great ways to interact with us on our shows on this lovely Tuesday afternoon here in the capital city. It is a bit chilly today, but not as chilly as it was before we left. It is not only, in the single digits and the negatives, which is what we left you all with on Thursday. The travel day for most was Thursday, and boy, was it cold. Where today, it says the high is 30. It feels like 19 with wind chill. I think the feels like it's what's always more important. But 19, man, it feels a heck of a lot different than when we were dealing with, negative 10 on Thursday. So also hope that all of you were able to deal with the Arctic chill that came through with the snow as well over the holiday weekend. But we will kick off today's show with the Chiefs and the Seahawks back on Christmas Eve. That was their Saturday matchup. The Chiefs get the win 24-10 over Seattle. Their lowest point total allowed since November 27th, when they allowed only 10 points to the LA Rams. The Chiefs again are 27 to the Bengals, 28 to Denver, and 24 to Houston in overtime in the 3 games since having a good matchup against the LA Rams. And the overall numbers would make you a little bit surprised. I mean, the Chiefs didn't even have 300 yards of offense on the day as they scored their 24 points. They only had 297 yards of offense. Patrick Mahomes threw for a couple of touchdowns, but he only threw for 224 yards. Travis Kelce was the only pass catcher with a big day. He had 6 catches for 113. Isaiah Pacheco only ran for 58 yards. But they got it done. They got to 24 points. It was nice. It was easy. Offensively, there are not a lot of news or notes that I would give about the way the offense played in this matchup against Seattle. Offense looked fine. It was cooking really early. The Chiefs eventually hopped out early on to a 17-0 lead, late in the first half, until Seattle was able to kick a field goal as time expired. And the first half, we get 17-3. So, and then the Chiefs only scored 1 touchdown the entire second half, and it was in the fourth quarter on a late Patrick Mahomes touchdown run. So, offensively, I know there were some comments as the game went on from Chiefs Kingdom and Twitter and things like that, kind of worrying about it. Oh, this is a really bad Seattle defense. You only got 24 on Seattle. You're not running the ball enough against a bad Seattle defense. This was probably another one of those games where Andy Reid was not going to dump out the playbook. We talk about this all the time. For good or for bad, Andy Reid reserves plays. That's the best way to put it. Andy Reid reserves plays against certain teams at certain times to not give away the things needed for big games against tougher opponents. You can agree or disagree with the philosophy. It's what he does is basically proven at this point. That is what he does. And I think Seattle was another point of that, which is where you only get the 24 points. So offensively, we know what they can do. It's kind of a dangerous game to play, but it is it's what they do at this point. So the offense, I'm not worried about at all. We just saw Patrick Mahomes have one of the greatest quarterback games of all time against Houston. I'm not going to think anything changed too much after one kind of slow game against Seattle. And in the running game, I mean, Isaiah Pacheco still ran well. He got 58 yards. He ran for 4 yards a carry. He had some good runs, had some good bursts. The Chiefs just didn't run the ball a ton, which I would like to see more against a really bad Seattle run defense, but they got the win. I'm not going to complain. The thing that is, I think, more important than any in this matchup against the Seahawks, the Chiefs defense showed up. This was the best defensive game in nearly a month for this Chiefs defense after being maligned for weeks about poor effort, poor consistent pass rush. They don't tackle. You have all heard me complain about the tackling for a month now, of not showing effort or grit or toughness, of fighting through these things and giving up what feels like 4 extra yards after every play. This was the best tackling game on just that front alone the Chiefs have had maybe even all season. They hold Seattle to just 10 points. They give up 3 points in the entire first half. They only give up 3 points. They hold Seattle to 2 of 14 on third down. Seattle converted just 2 third down opportunities all day. Geno Smith and this air attack for Seattle that have been the way they move the ball is throwing the football. That's what they do. They threw for 215 yards. DK Metcalf was held under 100 yards receiving by L'Jarius Sneed, who was tasked with traveling with DK all day and did a great job of tackling him and getting him down when he got there. And that was the thing that impressed me most. Now, was it a little annoying to see Kenneth Walker finally get it back to 100 yards rushing as he ran for 100 yards on 26 carries, averaged 4 yards a carry? I'll give you that. At the same time, Kenneth Walker's a very good young back. It took him 26 carries to get to 100 yards, so I'm not that worried at that point as well. And Seattle, as a Pete Carroll-led team, is eventually going to get a running game going, so I'm never, worried about that at all. But they ran the ball a little bit, that was fine. But the thing that made Seattle so good, and the thing that was honestly hurting Kansas City, the two things hurting the Chiefs, were giving up big pass plays and getting beat through the air and not tackling people, allowing yards after contact. They limited both of those things. perfectly against Seattle. And that's why I can't be upset with what happened. Because they did their job. They did what they were supposed to do. They did the thing that they needed to do, which is show up, be sound defensively, and make life a living hell for Geno Smith, for DK Metcalf, and the entire defense and the entire Seattle offense. And they did. They held Seattle to 3 points all the way until 2:25 when a touchdown was scored. If Jake was here, I know what his point would be. At that point, that is a garbage time touchdown when you're up 24-3. Does it really count? So in theory, when the defense needed to make plays, they needed to bow up, they needed to play well, they limited Seattle to just 3 points. 3. And then allowed a late touchdown to Noah Fant from Geno Smith with 2:25 to go. And then the Chiefs iced the game after that. This was the thing, I think, all that was left to be seen from this Chiefs team. As I had discussed and told everybody before this game, when the Chiefs play bad teams, don't, and it's still my advice, don't get stressed about the game until the bad team has beaten the Chiefs. Because there's only so much you can properly analyze and take away. Offensively, do not worry at all about anything this team does against the bad teams, particularly in the concept of mailing it in. We do a text stream from the 785 says they can't decide if the second half was incredible time possession by Seattle or the Chiefs offense mailing it in. It's a little bit of both. Seattle probably did a good job maintaining the time possession, with time possession also entirely overrated statistic. But the Chiefs offense mailed it in. Once they were up 17-3, they put it in cruise. And as I always say, whether you like it or you don't, you can have your opinion on either side of the spectrum. But they did mail it in. That's what they did. That's what they did, and that's what they have done consistently all year against these lower levels of competition, is they get up a big lead, and they mail it in. They just try to get to the end of the game, except this time the Chiefs did the thing that I want them to do when they're trying to win, is the way they close this out in the fourth quarter. Because 17-3, that's 2-score game. And as you go, Seattle all in is one touchdown. They're right back in it. What did the Chiefs do? It may have taken them forever to get there, but they got a late touchdown with 4:40 to go as Mahomes ran one in from 3 yards out. Acrobatic kind of Superman pushed up play. A great play by the MVP, which I don't know why we keep having this debate. Patrick Mahomes should be your MVP. People are mad because they want other people to win it. Mahomes has all the proper arguments. He should be your MVP. If he's not, I don't know, go kick rocks. I don't care. But they did what they needed to do, which is what I've said is one of the two ways you can ice a game. You can ice it by running out the clock, or you can ice it by just scoring. Make your lead bigger. Match scores. Do that, and a team also doesn't win if you keep scoring, because your lead gets bigger. And so it was nice to see the Chiefs finally found a way to get some things done and do that as well. But overall, what I would call one of the more stress-free wins. It wasn't sexy, it wasn't exciting, it wasn't dramatic, but it was a good, hard-nosed victory for the Chiefs that keeps them positioned to get the number 1 seed. They're still the 2 seed right now because Buffalo got a win as well, but you're still in position to hopefully win your final 2 games against Denver coming up on Sunday and the Raiders after that. You'll have a Denver team that's having their first game under their interim head coach. And then you get a Las Vegas team that is kind of up and down and, I mean, went full Raider against the Steelers on Christmas Eve, which was also very funny. Derrick Carr gonna Derrick Carr. It's the greatest time ever. So you should win your final 2 games, and now you just are about to have to see if you can get the one thing you want. Because coming up on Monday, on January 2nd, is the game that I think matters more than anything to what the Chiefs can do going forward when the Bills visit the Bengals. Both those teams have a lot to play for. Buffalo needs to keep winning to keep their number 1 seed. Cincinnati is honestly in the number 1 seed hunt because this is the way some of the things can turn out. If Cincinnati beats Buffalo, Buffalo falls from the 1 seed to the 3 seed because at that point, Cincinnati and Buffalo will be tied on record, and Cincinnati, by virtue of beating the Bills to get to this point, would hold the tiebreaker. And then the Chiefs catapult to the number 1 seed. Well, if the Chiefs lose to either Denver or Vegas, and Cincinnati wins out, the Cincinnati Bengals are your number 1 seed. Because at that point, if the Chiefs dropped just one game, the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Bengals would all be tied with 4 losses, and Cincinnati would hold the tiebreaker with head-to-head wins over both Buffalo and Kansas City. So the Bengals also have a lot to play for. That's going to make that matchup on January 2nd between the Bills and the Bengals one of the biggest games of the year to finish some things up. So if you're the Chiefs, everything you want, everything you desire is still right in front of you. I mean, right there. It is perfectly set up for the taking and to be in a proper position because you are here with just 2 more games to play against a 4-11 Broncos team on your last home game of the year. As Broncos are going to be with a new head coach and a new good chunk of their staff. We'll get to those changes to their staff coming up in the 1 o'clock hour when we kind of go around the NFL. We'll break down a little bit of those staff changes coming up for Denver. And then you get a Raider team on the road in Las Vegas where you have won consistently well, where Patrick Mahomes so far has never lost a road divisional matchup. And you're facing a Raiders team that, yes, played you really tough earlier this year in Kansas City when you only won 30-29 way back in week 5 at the beginning of October. But those are both very winnable games against division opponents to finish out the year. Possibly get to finish the year at 14-3 with a very good chance at getting the number 1 seed as long as our now friends in Cincinnati get the job done, which is also my overarching point here before we get to a break. Chiefs Kingdom, we need to become Cincinnati Bengals fans for a week. You can like it or you can dislike it or be neutral. Root for Cincinnati come Monday night. Better things happen if they beat the Bills than if the Bills beat the Bengals. So Cincinnati, Joe Burrow, my guy, this week, I'm rolling with you as well. We'll take our first time out here on Mike Depp. Coming up next, it wasn't using the word, but J.J. Watt today has effectively announced that this will be his last season in the NFL. We'll get to that coming up next here on Mike Up. Welcome back into Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW, and some retirement announcements suck more than others. I will preface that. In sports, some guys retire like, oh, it's whatever. Some guys, it's, you're sad, but you knew it was time. And then some guys retire like, man, I really am mad because your career could have been better than the great career it was. J.J. Watt essentially announced his retirement today without using the word retire. J.J. Watt tweeted this out from his Twitter page earlier today. It's a picture of him, his wife, and their new child, Koa, with J.J. Watt captioning it with, Koa's first ever NFL game, my last ever NFL home game. My heart is filled with nothing but love and gratitude. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure. So J.J. Watt, with that announcement, has essentially let everyone know, without using the word, that this is his final NFL season. This will be the last year that we will get to watch J.J. Watt play football, and he'll be retiring at season's end, which, what a career for J.J. Watt. He's going to end up retiring at the age of 33, 111 and a half career sacks. J.J. Watt, not once, but twice, had 20 sacks in a season. In 2012, his second in the league, he had 20 and a half sacks to lead the NFL. And then 2 years later, in 2014, he had 20 and a half sacks yet again. He had 69 sacks over a 4-year span. From 2012 to 2015, before his injury issues began, he had 69 sacks. And then injuries ravaged his career. Comes back in 2018 with 16 sacks. He has 9.5 this year in what will be his final year in the NFL. You have to imagine part of this decision is a little bit of age. Part of it maybe is wanting to spend time with his new child and with his wife. And part of it, undoubtedly for JJ, and we'll know more as he says more, has to be due to numerous health issues for himself and physically knowing what the limitations of his body are. But J.J. Watt announcing what will be his retirement today. He only has a few more games left in his NFL season before this career will be over. But what a career for one of the greatest defensive ends and a first ballot Hall of Famer without a shadow of a doubt. Congrats to J.J. Watt. We'll take another time out here on Mic'd Up. Coming up next, Matt Derrick will join us for Herman's Meat and Smokehouse Chiefs Insider. Headed to Kansas City as we chat on Tuesdays, like always, with our good friend Matt Derrick for our Herman's Meat Smokehouse Chiefs Insider. You can follow Matt on Twitter at Matt Derrick. And Matt, before we get into any football, did you have a good holiday weekend with your family, Matt?
Not too bad. It was very relaxing. How about yourself, Fulton?
It was pretty good, Matt. Got to see my parents, got to see some friends and family I haven't seen in a while. Got to have a nice 4 days down in Wichita with the family and everyone to relax a bit. So was also nice for me. I have to ask, as always, Matt, were there any good holiday desserts made at Shea Derrick for the holidays?
Well, my Charlotte Royale, it didn't come together like I wanted.
Oh, no.
It tasted fantastic.
That's good.
There's no doubt about that. It came across. But it needs more time. And I definitely tried to do a Great British Bake Off challenge of the timing. It really needs 2 days. If I had gone home after the game on Saturday and made my cake for the Swiss roll, it would have come out perfect. But instead, I was tired after the game and thought, I'll just get up early in the morning and start it on Christmas Day. So it cracked a little bit. Cake kind of fell apart. It wasn't great, but it still tasted good. Hey, the Swiss roll ingredients, so the whipped cream tasted good. The peanut butter mousse tasted good. So as long as you didn't, look at it for beauty, there were no pictures posted of it. It was okay. But everybody ate the lemon cream cheesecake. So that was actually more popular. I don't know why. Maybe it was just the audience, but that thing is already gone.
Man, that must speak to how good that cheesecake was there, Matt. But listen, sometimes presentation matters, but at the end of the day, as long as something tastes good, I think that's the most important part of everything. Presentation's nice. Taste trumps everything else when it comes to dessert.
That is true. So even though it was not my best work, I'm still eating it. Since nobody else ate it, that means it's up to me. and I've got no problem with eating chocolate and peanut butter.
Oh, of course, man. I'm right there with you there, Matt. Let's move to the football side of things, Matt. The Chiefs get a nice win on Christmas Eve at Arrowhead as they win 24-10 over the Seattle Seahawks. Let's start on the offensive side of things for the Chiefs. This is a Seattle team that over, I would at least say the past month, if not longer, maybe the entire season, has shown an inability to stop the run. The Chiefs, with that in mind, opened the game with 3 straight pass attempts on a 3-and-out and didn't really run the ball as much as I expected them to all day. Even against a poor run defense, were you surprised with the lack of an overall Chiefs run game, or is it just even against a poor run defense, Andy Reid's going to throw the ball because that's what Andy Reid does?
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs are who they are, so they're definitely not going to go out of character. And they ran the ball. Designed runs. They had 20 of them in 51 offensive plays. That's about what you'd expect. So that's no big surprise right there. Maybe the surprise, if maybe disappointment's a better word for it, was really coming out in the second half. You get the ball, and I thought you had an opportunity there. You're up 17-3. You got a chance to just run some clock and eat up some time. And instead, the Chiefs on their first couple of drives come out throwing the football. And I think at that point, since they were averaging 5 yards a carry on the ground in the first half, I would have stuck with the ground and tried to run the football a little bit more. Even get it in, I get Derrick McKinnon. That was not working well. He had 5 carries, 7 yards, but Isaiah Pacheco was doing pretty well. I wouldn't have minded to get some more work with for Ronald Jones, see what happens. But, instead Chiefs come out and throw the football, and it cost them a couple of times because the drives early in the second half wasn't productive. I mean, you get yourself into second and long, third and longs, and even the Chiefs have a hard time converting those sometimes. So I would have done that. I mean, I would have come out and tried to establish the run the second half, just set the tone and really, take control of things. And instead they don't. And as a result, Seattle gets some points and, got a lot of plays in the second half and, wore out the Chiefs defense a little bit. I would have done things differently, but Andy Reid is more successful than I am and makes a lot more money. So I guess you go with what Andy Reid said.
The Chiefs offense overall on the day probably had, I don't want to call their, output lackluster. They did still score 24 points. The ball was moving with a fair amount of efficiency. Travis Kelce had another 100-yard receiving day, but it just felt like a game where the offense was just, I guess, going through the motions. Would you attribute this to Seattle's defense played better than they played in some time? Or, as we've kind of talked about and have noted and has been noted by many others, was this maybe a game where Andy Reid was pulling out the more vanilla playbook because this should be a Seattle team that his team beats and he wanted to preserve a bit more for the playoffs coming up in a few weeks?
Yeah, I think it was 2 parts to it. One, I do think that, it was a little bit more vanilla. I thought, this is really a third game in a row where I thought the Chiefs really kind of went with a vanilla game plan. And to your point, I mean, why put your best stuff on film right now if you don't have to against some teams that you expect to win when we want to save your best stuff for later on? And maybe you're even putting some things on film right now that you want some playoff teams to see and, not be ready for what you're going to do in the postseason. So I get all that. And the second part, too, is that I just don't know if we've really focused on enough is just how difficult the football was to move in that weather on Saturday. It was cold. And as a result, the football was very slick and hard as a rock. I think you definitely saw it in the kicking game. I mean, the punters were having a terrible time. The wind was a factor as well, but, and so I think that extended over into the passing game. I mean, certainly the Chiefs, had some moments, but, for both teams, deep ball really wasn't there. I mean, there was maybe one really good play deep down on the in the passing game. Seattle had one that was just an absolutely perfect ball, the DK Metcalf. But other than that, I mean, it was really difficult to get anything established in the air. And I think the weather was a big part of it. Even, the Chiefs had even some drops that I think that on a normal day probably are catches. So it was just a very difficult day to be moving the football in the air. Chiefs didn't do anything terribly creative. So you put those 2 factors together, probably why the offense, was a little generic. It was a decent day for both defenses, although, I mean, I never really felt like the Seattle defense got too much going. I mean, they were better in the second half, especially against the run. But, didn't really put any pressure on Mahomes for the most part. And I think if in a better weather day, he's probably, Patrick Mahomes probably picks him apart for 300 yards and has a pretty easy afternoon.
Let's move on to the defensive side of things here, Matt, because the defense for about the past month has taken a lot of heat against some lower level competition. They get 27 against Cincinnati. That was a game where everyone was frustrated with the tackling, me in particular, and included of a poor tackling effort that let Cincinnati get the win. Then they go against Denver, give 28 points to a Denver Broncos team that just a few weeks later fires their head coach on after Christmas of all times because of a poor performance on Christmas Day. And then they gave up 24 to the Houston Texans as well. So that defense was under a microscope. All they do in this game is come out, limit Seattle to 10 points, and really 3 overall because they gave up that final 7 with about 2:20 left on the clock. Was this, and we're going to break this into parts here, Matt, was this the best tackling day overall that you have seen out of the Chiefs this season?
That's a pretty good point because I think it probably was. I mean, I can't really point to any egregiously missed tackle, and that's something that we had been seeing of late. I mean, there were probably a couple, and I haven't seen where the missed tackle totals actually came out for this game. But anecdotally, it certainly felt like that this was a game where the Chiefs just did a really good job. And certainly if you look at the total numbers and especially the assisted tackles, Nick Bolton had 17 tackles, 9 of them were assists. That's how you can really, tell that a team is, getting to the football and rallying around it is just, how many guys are involved in the tackles. And it seemed like every single time there was more than one guy getting there. So I agree. I thought that this was their better tackling job. It was definitely more of a team effort, but it was, and certainly I thought that the secondary played extremely tough. They had, I think, 33 total tackles just coming from the secondary guys. That's pretty good. Especially since sometimes, we've looked at the corners and the safeties and said, maybe there's some missed tackles there and maybe they're not as physical as they need to be. That I thought was probably one of the more physical days from the secondary on Saturday.
Tackling has been a thing that I've been lamenting this team on for weeks. As I tell Jake all the time, to me, I know there's some technical aspects of tackling that are important and do need to be factored in. But to me, also, there's a large part of tackling that's just be more physical than the guy you're hitting. If you're the more physical man, you'll win and drive him back. And I think a great tone setter of the day for how the Chiefs tackle was. Think about the first drive against Seattle. DK Metcalf catches a slant. He's really close to the line to gain. Nick Bolton does a great job to stand him up, and a rally knocks him back and keeps him short. I think you're right in the fact of the assisted tackle is a good mark there for how the team rallied on the day. And then the secondary hit it was just tackling so well, particularly, and that brings us to a good point. You talk about the tackle in the secondary. Those young guys that are still learning at a time when the rookie wall can come up, I think this might have also been one of the better days for the trio of young corners in Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams, because it looked like all in the field all the time. Every time there's a big play for the Chiefs defense, you more often than not found at least one of those young guys in the mix there. How would you assess how the rookie corners did on that game against Seattle?
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. And I had a chance to talk to Trent McDuffie about exactly that after the game, and just pointed out, and asked him, hey, the tackling has been something that this team has had some difficulties with. What kind of brought that on Saturday? And he thought it was 2 parts. One was certainly he thought the weather was a factor. He's like, this was a cold weather game. We knew it was going to be physical. And it just seemed like that was the tone for the week with this team, was that they wanted to go out and play physical in the cold weather. And they felt like if they did that, they were going to kind of take Seattle's will a little bit. And they wanted to establish that. They wanted to establish the upper hand. And as a result, I think that physicality played off for them. The other part of it, too, is that he says that the veterans are really stressing to the young guys about the fact that, hey, it's December. It's getting to be January. It's close to the postseason. This is when you have to crank it up a notch. It doesn't get any easier from here on out. You've got to play faster. You got to play harder. You got to play tougher. And if that message is sinking in with the young guys, then that's a really good sign, because that's absolutely true. In the postseason, everything's faster. These guys have got to be ready for it. And if those two things are kind of coming along, that this rookie class is realizing that this time of year they've got to crank it up a notch, and they've got to bring the physicality, and they've got to be ready for that speed, then I think that's a good sign.
Sticking with this rookie class, as of late, is George Karlaftis playing the best football you've seen from him in a Chiefs uniform here in his rookie year?
Yeah, this has been a really good stretch for him. And, And one of the things that I've been really impressed with is obviously what I think he has been best at has been just getting his hand on the football at the line of scrimmage and knocking passes down. That goes back to me all the way back to OTAs. That was the one thing that stood out to me from the very beginning with him was that he just has an innate ability to get his arms in the air, to fill up the passing lanes. There were quite a few footballs that we saw just knocked down back in June at practice, and you see that now. I mean, he's I think leading one of the leaders in the league as far as passes knocked down. He's getting on a little stretch now where he's been picking up some sacks, been getting more quarterback pressures. He certainly seems to be getting more and more comfortable every week. And those are big plays. I mean, anytime a defensive lineman can knock out a pass and affect a passer in any way, it's good. I mean, good things are going to happen from that. And it just seems like each and every week, Karlaftis is just making, one more better play than he did the week before. And that's what the Chiefs were banking on. I mean, they weren't really sure what they're going to get out of this rookie class at the beginning. And with Karlaftis, I know that there was maybe some frustration that maybe the numbers just weren't there early on. But the Chiefs were really banking that, hey, in the second half of the season, these guys were going to get more comfortable and you were going to start to see it. And I think with both Karlaftis and McDuffie and even Cook, I think Brian Cook is really coming on now too. I think all three of those guys have been, playing some of their best football in the last few weeks.
Moving to the pass rush here as a whole, as we chat with Matt Derrick, or Herman's Meat Smokehouse Chief Censor. You can follow Matt on Twitter at Matt Derrick. The pass rush has been up and down all year, and the solid overall stats look nice. They're up there in sacks and pressures, all those things that make people kind of wonder sometimes why we talk about the pass rush. It's been the consistency that I would say is the issue, and the complementary pass rush that has been the issue. Against Seattle, it was a lot of the times four guys at the line of scrimmage, all winning, and not just Chris Jones or other guys one at a time here. What'd you make against the pass rush as a whole against Seattle? And are you starting to maybe see some things that could bode well to the pass rush playing more consistently these final two games of the regular season and going into the playoffs?
Yeah, to me, I mean, I think you could see what happens when you have a healthy Chris Jones versus last week when, Chris Jones was under the weather and you kind of saw what happened against the Texans. He was quiet. I mean, there wasn't a lot of production from him in any regard, whether it was tackles or pressures or anything whatsoever. I mean, that was probably Chris Jones' worst game of the season last week, and against a really bad football team. And and the Texans had a decent afternoon offensively. Then you see what happens when Chris Jones is at his best, and I think he was. I mean, I think it was an absolutely 180 switch against the Seahawks. He had 10 pressures, 4 quarterback hits. I mean, a couple of tackles for a loss. Chris Jones had one of his best games, period, against the Seahawks. And what happens when that happens? Other guys around him start having better games, especially in the second half. In the first half, Seattle really, to my surprise, and I think maybe they're going a little bit off of that film against the Texans, thought that they could just get away with, do a little one-on-one with Chris Jones, and then maybe he wasn't 100%. They realized that was not the case, and they started doubling him. When they started doing that, then you started seeing Frank Clark getting free, and George Karlaftis and Mike Dana and Carlos Dunlap. You started seeing guys winning their matchups, and to me, that's how valuable Chris Jones is. If he's playing at the level that he's capable of, and there's nothing limiting him, he is right now, I think, the best defensive tackle in the league. And when you've got that in the middle of your line, it's just going to make the other guys better. And that's going to be the key going forward. I mean, if Chris Jones can maintain that level, especially against some of the teams that they're going to see in the postseason, and then other guys can start winning their matchups on the outside, that's what the Chiefs need against teams like the Bengals and against the Bills. They've got to have that.
All right, Matt, the Chiefs have a matchup against Denver coming up on Sunday. There's a lot of things that can happen between now, here on Tuesday, and the matchup coming up on Sunday. But one of the things we know for sure, Denver's going to be coming in with an interim head coach and a lot of other changes to their offensive and special team staff as well, with the firing of Nathaniel Hackett. They gave up 51 points to the Rams on Christmas Day. I don't know how much of that game you got to catch there, Matt. But overall, the last time Chiefs faced the Denver Broncos, they scored a season-high 28 points. They found a way to get their offense going. Now, part of that was turnovers on the Kansas City Chiefs, but there are other factors that got the Broncos going. Here in the rematch just a few weeks later, how much do you think the fact that Nathaniel Hackett has now been replaced and has been fired as the head coach, how much do you think that should impact what's going to happen on Sunday for the Chiefs and the Broncos coming up?
Yeah, it's really interesting to me because I thought that based on what we've seen a lot of, Broncos games this year because they were put into prime time so much. That was their best effort of the year, the Chiefs. I mean, across the board, offensively and defensively. They were fired up for that game. But at the same time, the Chiefs at that point had them down in that game and were literally, I thought, one score away from delivering the knockout punch for the Broncos, where they would have the meltdown that you saw them have this week against the Rams. Chiefs were one play away, I think, from doing that. Now it's happened. Now you've seen, hey, it got so bad they have to fire Nathaniel Hackett. You had guys fighting on the sidelines. You had guys fighting against the Rams. One of two things happens after a game like that, after a coach gets fired. One is that everybody just checks out. They're done. They know that it's over, and everybody's gone their own separate ways. Guys are mad at each other, and they just don't come together. Or hey, now that the coach is gone, there's a cloud lifted, and everybody is happy, and it becomes a nice time to come into work and everything. One of those things, two things is happening with this team, and we really don't know which direction it's going to go. I mean, that's why Andy Reid told us yesterday, you got to be prepared for anything and everything, because this team could go one of two ways, and there could be a lot of wholesale changes. You could see lineup changes. You could see schematic changes. I mean, it could go a lot of different directions. But if the same Broncos team shows up that showed up against the Rams, and they're not on the same page, and they're fighting against each other, and the offense is bad to defense, I mean, Chiefs are going to put it away. And I think the Chiefs certainly want to get the taste out of their mouth of that game against the Broncos. So I think they're going to be more focused. They'll probably put a little bit more effort into this one, maybe a little bit less vanilla in the game planning. We'll see. But I think there's, at least from the Kansas City side, they want to, kind of establish that game in Denver was a little bit more of a fluke. And I honestly, I don't know which Denver team is going to show up. So let's see what happens. But I think this is the week you definitely have to be on guard when the team fires their coach, and they may come in and just be ready to play lights out, or they may have 53 guys thinking about playing golf. I mean, you just never know.
All right, Matt, my final two questions went two for the road for you. First things first. Is Nathaniel Hackett the only AFC West coach that gets fired this year?
Probably. I mean, there's a chance, I suppose, if the Chargers miss the playoffs, maybe they do something. I think the Raiders are too cheap to make a move with Josh McDaniels this quickly. So I'm guessing, and I can't imagine Andy Reid does anything. So I mean, his Chiefs aren't going to let him go. It's just a matter of I don't think he's going to have a surprise retirement. So that would be my guess, but in the NFL, you never know. I mean, there's going to be probably 8 coaches this year let go, and one or two of them will probably be a surprise. So let's see. But I would think Hackett will be the one.
I'm with you right there, Matt. My final thing for you, J.J. Watt announces his retirement. He's going to be done at the end of the season. How quickly do you think he gets into the Hall of Fame?
I would think first ballot. I mean, he seems to have both the things you have to have. You gotta be a great player, and you gotta be likable. So I'd be really surprised if he has to wait very long. I think he'd be first ballot, but the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame is so political. You just never know. I'm
with you, Matt, but I would like things a first ballot as well. Matt, thank you so much, my friend. Have a good rest of your week and enjoy Chiefs Broncos on Sunday.
You too, Fulton. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, Matt. That is Matt Derrick, our Harness Bean Smokehouse Chiefs insider. We'll take a timeout. We'll do it for the noon hour. Coming at the 1 o'clock hour, we'll go around the NFL. Welcome back into Mic'd Up here on 580 WIDW. Fulton Caster with you riding solo. Jake has the day off. He is finishing up his holiday with his family. He will be back tomorrow. So it'll be Jake and me, the usual full gang, coming up on tomorrow afternoon's edition of Mic'd Up. I want to thank Matt Derrick coming on. As always, love being able to chat with Matt about all things Chiefs and getting to know the latest lowdown on what's going on in Kansas City. Coming up here in the 1 o'clock hour, we're going to go around the NFL. There is a lot to get to, and I'll be brutally honest, we're probably not going to get to it all today. We'll get to as much as we can. We'll probably get to a little bit tomorrow as well, with just how much there is to get to from a big holiday weekend of the NFL. So we'll get to some of that. Everyone loves a list today. We never got to do our best Christmas dinner options, because I think Christmas dinner has some different options, different things you should go to than a Thanksgiving dinner. And I don't know if I'm correct on this vibe, if it's just my family and the dinners that we've had and I've done, but it feels like Christmas dinner always has a different vibe than Thanksgiving dinner. We never got the best Christmas dinner foods and stuff like that. So today, in the spirit of that, we're going to go best leftovers from Christmas dinner. So a little bit of a vibe of, what would you like to have? And what are the best parts of Christmas dinner? Because they're probably the best leftovers, but also just what's kind of the vibe of what you do after a big holiday meal and things like that. So that will be our list coming up today here on Mic'd Up. Then, of course, Dan will join me at the bottom of the hour for CrossTalk. We'll chat with our man from 580 Sports Talk, Dan Lucero. Then, of course, coming up in the 2 o'clock hour, we got some Big 12 hoops. We'll look at just how good the conference is. We'll play a little odds makers. Kyle will join me for that, as well as the list today. And we'll take a final look at the Chiefs win over the Seahawks and as they head into the final 2 games of the regular season. As always, you can join in on the Big O Tires text line 785-272-9429. Or we are live on YouTube, as always. Go to youtube.com. Go to Sports on 580. Listen, watch live. Get to see what's going on up here today. And, of course, you can hop in the comment section of our live YouTube feed. To kick off this hour, though, we're going to go around the NFL. There were some big games in the NFL this weekend that had some implications on the playoff race, and that's where we'll start. On Thursday, we told you it was one of the biggest games of the weekend. It ended up coming out the way I thought it would, though the game was less exciting than I thought it would be. The Jaguars beat the Jets. And in addition to a thing that happened on Saturday, which was the Houston Texans beating the Tennessee Titans, something that I, in our Sports on 580 show picks, may have taken the Texans to cover this week, because I just knew facing Malik Willis, you go with the feisty Texans. With the Texans beating the Titans and the Jags beating the Jets, the Jacksonville Jaguars currently lead the AFC South. And if everything holds, this is where things get interesting in the South. And we'll break this down more as the week goes. Jags play the Texans this week, a game they should hopefully win. Titans play the Cowboys. There's a chance, and I'd have to look at the clinching scenarios for this week to see how this would work. And I believe the clinching scenarios have been put out for this week, and they have. So give me just 1 minute. We're kind of calling an audible. And I expect to get into the clinching scenarios. But you know what? We're going to call an audible in the spirit of the NFL coming up here. So we'll try and look at what is going on with the Jacksonville Jaguars if my internet will cooperate and pull up the things that I need pulled up. There it is. There's the things I am looking for as more things be slow and need to pull up. There's no AFC South clinching scenario this week, it looks like. So that does mean that if the Jags win and the Texans lose, the Jags at that point have a one-game lead in the AFC South as the Jags and Titans play in Week 18 at the final game of the season. I believe that does mean if the Titans win, they can still get in and win the AFC South if they tie with Jacksonville. We'll break down that more as the week goes on here. But the Jags, either way, are sitting pretty to try and make it into the playoffs. Something I kind of predicted when the season began. I'm feeling good about that one. Bengals were able to beat the Patriots to keep their hopes at a number 1 seed and the NFC North title alive. The Panthers took down the Lions to put a pin in their playoff hopes for the Lions, as they now need a little bit more help to try and get a win there and get in. The Panthers also now are in a position to where if they can beat the Bucs coming up this week, they're in a spot where they could win the NFC South. The Cowboys beat a Gardner Minshew-led Eagles team, so the Cowboys now theoretically are still alive for the NFC East division title. So Philadelphia would have to lose their final 2 games, and the Cowboys would have to win out for Dallas to secure the NFC East title and the number 1 seed at that point as well, is how that would start to really come down to, barring what other things might happen as well. Packers beat the Dolphins to keep their playoff hopes alive, and the Dolphins' playoff hopes to start dwindling as their issues are becoming. And then, of course, the Rams embarrassed the Broncos on Christmas afternoon with Patrick Starr on Nickelodeon roasting Russell Wilson, which was the funniest thing I've ever seen. If you haven't seen it, it is hilarious. It is Patrick Starr from SpongeBob roasting Russell Wilson as he threw an interception. Might have been the funniest thing that I saw on Christmas Day, as the Rams scored 51 points against the Broncos, which led to the firing of Nathaniel Hackett. And then on Monday night, just last night, the Chargers beat the Colts. The Chargers, with the win, have clinched a spot in the playoffs, so they'll make the playoffs for the first time since 2018. Those are the biggest news and notes from the NFL East on what games happened, as I kind of quickly ran through those. There are 2 big notes that came out of the NFL this weekend. One is important, and Jake and I will break down a little bit more as the week goes. The Broncos firing Nathaniel Hackett. The Broncos held a press conference today. GM George Payton was involved. Broncos' new owner was involved as well. They try and kind of discuss what is happening, what they're going to do, as Greg Penner, the new owner and CEO of the Broncos, was discussing as well. It comes off as Nathaniel Hackett was done. He was not going to make it through to next season. The Broncos were fine with letting him coach out the rest of the year, and then they would fire him when the season was over. It'd be a 1-year relationship. But it appears that allowing 51 points to a Rams team that was 4-10 was starting their 4th quarterback of the year in Baker Mayfield. They'd started Matt Stafford. They started John Wolford. They started Bryce Perkins. And now Baker Mayfield. A team without numerous offensive starters. A team without numerous defensive starters, including Aaron Donald, one of the best defensive players of all time. Giving up that team 51 points, only scoring 14 for yourself. And then also there being discord on the sideline. Backup quarterback Brett Rippon and offensive lineman Dalton Reisner, K-State legend, got into a little bit of a shouting match on the sidelines, with Rippon and Reisner needing to be separated afterwards. The fact that there is dysfunction amongst the team, the fact that they had such an embarrassing loss on Christmas Day, appeared to be kind of a straw that broke the camel's back, into which the Broncos pulled the trigger and decided to fire Nathaniel Hackett with 2 games to go. So it was a situation that looked like Nathaniel Hackett was for sure done, was not going to get a chance at a second season. But with the way the loss came on Sunday against the Rams, the Broncos decided that they should just pull the trigger early. They can get a slight jump start on the head coaching search process, and more importantly, try and salvage somewhat of the culture coming up for this year. I don't know what the Broncos are going to do for a new head coach. I truly don't know where they're going to go with it. It's not, in my opinion, a desirable situation. And I'll bring in a text from Military's text line from the 75 says, can you really blame a first-year coach for inheriting a hapless organization? Here's the thing. I don't know if Nathaniel Hackett will ever be a good head coach if he gets another run at this. He deserves a share of the blame. The fact that early on he had to cede crucial head coaching decisions and bring in help to figure out how to manage a game. The fact that after about a month and a half, he ceded play calling duties. He, I think, was in over his head. You can't put that all on the Broncos organization. I know around here it's a lot of fun to poke fun at the Broncos. I know Jake is probably laughing it up and poking fun at the Broncos since they had to fire Hackett. But part of it was Nathaniel Hackett, I don't think, was prepared for the job. Maybe he'll be good down the line. Maybe, this is an experience he can draw for other things. I don't know. He clearly looked outmatched for the job from the first game that they played against Seattle in primetime on Monday Night Football. He looked like he didn't know what to do and did not know how to, manage the game flow. Denver has pieces on their team that is nice. That defense has a lot of talent on it. The offense has pieces at different prospects. I still love Courtland Sutton as a wide receiver. I think he's very talented and one of the better ones in the league. Tim Patrick's a fantastic wide receiver 3 that didn't even get to play this year because he tore his ACL in training camp. And Jerry Jeudy, for all of his off-the-field things that I'm starting to personally think are a problem, his attitude, I think, is a big problem. Now, this is something that only really seemed to come up since this year with the dysfunction, so maybe that's a one-off thing, but he still has been a decently talented wide receiver, but has had other issues as well. There is talent on that team, in my opinion. So I don't want to give Nathaniel Hackett a pass and say, well, he failed because he was in Denver. No, he failed in part because of some of the other issues in Denver and the fact that the quarterback that they brought in, that they traded the farm for, and then proceeded to give a ridiculous contract to, turned into a pumpkin. That is definitely a problem that Nathaniel Hackett inherited. The other problem was just he was not ready for the job. But back to my larger point, this is not an enviable job that coaches are going to want. You have no draft capital. None. Denver mortgaged their drafting future for Russell Wilson. You're in draft capital hell. Your cap situation's kind of less than desirable because you have so much money tied up in a bad quarterback in Russell Wilson. If you come in, you're part of what is now, can you fix Russ situation, which is going to have all its own narrative and storylines. It is not a great situation to walk into. And the thing is, Denver created it themselves. I don't feel bad for what Denver's going through. I don't feel bad for a single second. Because I think all of their biggest issues of why this is now going to become a job that nobody wants and is also a job to make hard to make work is they mortgaged the future for Russell Wilson, and boy, did they fail at what they got. Russ is cooked. I don't think there's fixing Russell Wilson. Watching him play football and watching the way he acts, I don't think there's anything that fixes that. But more importantly, the contract he is tied up with, which means that any coach that comes in, Russell Wilson's your quarterback. You can't come in with an idea of, well, he's not my guy. I'll go someone different. I'll bring in my own guy. We can draft somebody else. You can't do that. You are stuck with Russell. Going to Denver means that Russell Wilson is your quarterback. And that, I think, makes it an untenable situation. And then just the dysfunction with the way that organization is ran is a problem. And I think it's going to be even worse going forward. Because there's something that Broncos owner and CEO Greg Penner said today when he's discussing some of these things. As they were discussing at a press conference about the coaching search, he says the next head coach will answer to him. Which one means George Paton. I recommend pulling up the classifieds and finding a new job. Because either that means you are going to be fired or you're about to be stripped of any and all of your duties and be turned to a patsy. So have fun with that. Which I think is fair because I think he deserves some of the blame as well for what's up with this team. But to me, an over-involved owner is one of the biggest signs of a terribly run organization. If your owner has to feels the need to put their hands into everything, to micromanage, that is a sign of a terribly run organization. We can make jokes about Robert Kraft and some of the things he's had to deal with and some of the things that happened in his past. How often are his fingers into what's ever been done in New England during their big years? He's been involved, sure, and has done certain things, but overall, his hands are not deeply entrenched in what's happening. Look at the Chiefs and their success recently. How often do we bring up Clark Hunt? Truly. Chiefs fans want to think to yourself, when's the last time you thought, man, look what Clark Hunt did? That man hangs out in Dallas with his oil money and all that stuff and does nothing. He lets Brett Veach and Andy Reid run the castle. That's how it should be. Bad teams have ownerships that are way too tied into what's happening. They micromanage. And a lot of those times, these are owners who don't know what they're doing. Look at the Raiders. The Raiders, a criminally run organization. They are awful and terribly managed. Mark Davis is always around what that team's doing wrong. Always. Bad teams stay bad, partly because their owners don't know how to get the hell out of the way. And the fact that George Penner said today that the new head coach will end up answering heavily to him, Denver fans, if you are somehow listening, that's the sign that your team is about to go woo right down the pipe. Because overly involved owners don't work. There is a balance to how that works. Your owners can't be completely hands-off. They need to help make some decisions or at least have some overall thoughts to keep your GMs accountable. But they need to let their GMs and their football executives run the football team. Think about the Commanders. They have the worst owner in the league. How often is his dumb name brought up in the stupid things that they do? The best owners, in my opinion, are the ones you could not tell me who they are. For better or worse, it is better to not know who owns a team. There are probably people out there who have no idea that Clark Hunt owns the Chiefs. Now, I think most people do it partly in part because the Hunts are football royalty. But again, you never hear about him. You don't hear what he's doing because he just lets Brett Veach and Andy Reid do everything. That's where I think part of this dysfunction with Denver starts and stops. Nothing's going to get better for Denver by bringing in a new head coach. It was the right move to make. Nathaniel Hackett needed to be fired. He was way in over his head. I am a noted give a coach more than 1 year guy. I don't usually believe in firing a coach after one season because there's so little you can accomplish in one season. But some guys just look so out of place. Look so incompetent in what they're doing that you know it won't work. And then so we saw it with Nathaniel Hackett. He's gone. He is gone. He has been fired. Denver's first game without Nathaniel Hackett coming up on Sunday against the Chiefs. And we'll see what happens for that game. But man, this is just, we all saw this coming. Every single one of us saw this coming. But still, it is hilarious to me what this team will now have to go through. And this is a team in 2015 that won a Super Bowl. But because they were so poorly set up afterwards and run so poorly by John Elway, then kind of by George Paton, never really got the head coaching situation figured out. Dealt with Vic Fangio. Boy, that was a mess. Because of all that, this is a Broncos team that has not gone to the playoffs since they won their Super Bowl. They have not gone to the playoffs in now 7 years since winning a Super Bowl. That is the longest stretch of not going to the playoffs immediately following a Super Bowl in NFL history. And most things are to blame themselves. They'll get a new head coach eventually. They'll figure it out. Condoleezza Rice is apparently going to help them figure out the head coaching situation. I don't know why the hell she keeps coming up in football things. She's a politician. I got nothing there. I don't have jokes to fire off. I just laugh at every time that comes up. But Denver, good luck. That's all I got for you. Good luck. We'll take a timeout. Coming up next, Everyone Loves the List. Time for Everyone Loves the List here on Mic'd Up, and I bring in my good friend Kyle Manthey to help me out with it today with Jake on vacation. Kyle, our list today, Christmas leftovers, the best ones to have, which also translates into things you want around Christmas dinner. It's kind of a combo list because we never got to this before Christmas, and my show, I got to do what the heck I want without Jake here. What is your number 4 on Christmas leftovers, just things you like with Christmas dinner?
Number 4, I'll put turkey / roast / ham / whatever meat is being served that night. That's going to be the number 4 slot.
Leftover main meat is good. For me, number 4, I'm going to go specific because this is also a meat I had with our Christmas dinner today. Not today, but, on Sunday. Give me leftover Christmas brisket. Brisket sandwich of leftovers. Oh, it's one of the greatest things you could ever have.
Number 3, I'm going to go cinnamon roll. It may be kind of breakfasty, but sometimes it can be a dessert.
Good call.
I want a leftover cinnamon roll.
That's still a good call. Number 3 for me, they count as leftovers when you just have a bunch of them to eventually eat after the initial meal. Give me those leftover Christmas cookies, man. Those homemade Christmas cookies, that's one of the best leftovers you can have.
Number 2, maybe recency bias because it's what we had, but I want leftover chili. Chili's just so good.
Chili is always a good call. I truly would agree with you there. Number 2 for me, give me that leftover Christmas pie. I love me a good Christmas pie.
Number 1, I don't want to overthink it. I want the leftover cookies.
That's a good call. I thought about putting it a lot higher on the list, but I have so many other things. Number one for me, it's because it gets to be its own specific thing here at Christmas. Leftover Christmas ham. You should all have ham if you can, dietary and other restrictions enabling. Have ham. It's a fantastic time. It's a fantastic thing to have. It is number one on my Christmas leftovers. You can chime with yours on the Big O Tires text line, 785-272-9429. We'll take a timeout. Daniel Sarah joins us for CrossTalk coming up next. Welcome back into Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW. In response to our best holiday leftovers, someone from 785 has added homemade candies. I will be honest, 785, I read that initially as homemade candles. I got very concerned that you were eating candles, but I see that that word is candies, not candles. I promise I can read the English language, just apparently I struggle with it from time to time. We got a lot of fun stuff to get to here, Mic'd Up, but right now I'll bring in my good man, Dan Lucero of 580 Sports Talk, as Dan is with us here for some CrossTalk. Dan, first things first, how was your holiday weekend?
It was nice. Thank you for asking. It was nice to, I was back in Colorado with my parents, and my wife and I went out there. First Christmas as a married couple, spent it in the Denver area. Saw my brother and his wife. They hosted Christmas Eve dinner, and then Christmas was at my parents' house. So yeah, it was really nice. It was enjoyable. Got to spend a little extra time in Denver. Got to a Nuggets game Friday night, which was cool. Yeah, good weekend. Not the easiest travel weekend that I've ever had, but I am at the place that I intended to be. And I know there are a lot of people out there right now that aren't. And so I am not going to complain. I got champagne problems, which are not problems at all. So I will not complain about my own travel journey. Just it took a bit of a different method to get to where we wanted to go.
It took a little bit of a different route for you to get here, but it used to be everyone's having travel problems. But
hey, I'm here. 580 Sports Talk. The show got to go on. Brendan's not back yet. Somebody's got to do the show, and damn it, it's going to be me.
As I say, I'm really glad you're here, because last thing I wanted for someone to be like, hey, Fulton, can you do like 6 hours of sports talk today?
Oh, that's nothing.
That's easy.
Nothing for you.
Cake.
I've heard you talk. You got 6 hours in you.
You know what? I probably could have found 6 hours if need be, but I am very happy that you're here, and I'm happy more overall outside of just maybe me not having to work for 6 hours of sports talk, that you guys were able to, you and your wife, be able to make it back to Topeka and get us here and get home safely. Moving on to the sports side of things here, Dan. I'm just going to start here because it's just where I think we need to start. Where were you when the Broncos announced that they fired Nathaniel Hackett and were moving on to an interim head coach for the final 2 games?
In my parents' living room trying to rent a car, which, again, a bit of an allusion to. If you want to hear the full story, tune in to 5A Sports Talk later. I'm not going to subject your listeners to it. People who choose to listen to me, I'm going to subject them to that. You're kind of foisting me on your listeners right
That's
now.
That's true.
People tune in to 5A Sports Talk. On the other hand, they know what they know what they signed up for. Anyway, yeah. So I was in Colorado, which was appropriate, which was kind of nice because as driving out of town, I got to listen to a lot of the local sports talk reaction. And as long as the Broncos, this is probably more their fans, but I think certainly organizationally they have acted like this the last couple of seasons. As long as they continue to act as though there is a deus ex machina, there is a savior out there for them, that they are just a wave of the wand away from becoming the pillar AFC franchise that they believe themselves to be. And in fairness, from the late 70s to the mid 2000s, mid 2010s, they pretty much have been without much interruption. As long as they continue to act like that, they're going to continue being what they've been, which is a disaster, a mess. They thought they were a quarterback away. They tried to get Aaron Rodgers. They couldn't get Aaron Rodgers. They tried to get Aaron Rodgers by hiring his best buddy as the coach, and that didn't work out. They gave Russell Wilson $245 million before he ever took a snap for the team. We've seen how that has turned out. So there's not a savior out there. I mean, people are seriously talking about, well, they've got to hire Peyton Manning to run football operation. Why? Why would Peyton Manning?
Makes no sense.
Why would he want that job, especially right now? That doesn't sound like fun.
That man's fun right now is he gets to hang out with his brother and watch Monday Night Football together and make jokes.
Why would you leave that gig to try and figure out how you're going to be able to win her out of a $245 million lemon at quarterback? Like, what? Like, for who? For what? Yeah. Like, I don't love anything that much. I don't think Peyton Manning loves the Broncos that much. He just let him chill and make TV. Let him rock with Peyton's Places. I want a season 4. It's getting better. It's getting good. Like, I heard on local sports talk radio driving out of Denver, like, seriously asking about, do you think Mike Shanahan would want to be a part of whatever the Broncos have going on? Number one, that bridge was burnt by a man named Joe Ellis, and that is a much longer story. There is a reason Kyle Shanahan is not the head coach of the Broncos. They could have hired him. They wouldn't let him bring Dad back into the building, and that's why Vance Joseph ended up being the Broncos head coach and not Kyle Shanahan. So, you can trace a lot of misery back to that precise moment. But, like, there's no one person. There's no one thing. The roster stinks. The culture stinks. It's been 7 years as a joke. Like, this is not Peyton Manning in 2012 walking through the door of a team that went to the playoffs with Tim Tebow as the quarterback, and boom, that's the deus ex machina. That's what fixes the Broncos. There isn't a quick fix, and if they don't understand that now, then I guess they never will, and they'll continue to be this for a long time, and I know that wouldn't upset Chiefs fans one iota. Meanwhile, Clippy, the old Nathaniel Hackett's Ask Jeeves up in the booth is coming down to be the head coach against the Chiefs on Sunday.
That entire franchise it baffles me at some of their decision making, and it baffles me at the way they act. And I guess my biggest thing with Denver is this, and I'd love your thoughts on it. I don't view Denver as an enviable spot for any head coach to want to go to. There's no draft capital with this team. They're about to enter salary cap hell, and part of the amount of money they're spending on Russell Wilson, and more importantly, any head coach that is brought in, they have to be brought up to the understanding that Russell Wilson's your quarterback. You don't get to change that. You don't get to modify that or go with who you think is your guy. You're coming in to be with Russell Wilson, which I think that has to make this Denver job not an enviable one for any of the potential head coaching candidates.
For 1 year at least, right? I mean, probably 2.
At least 2, in my opinion.
Maybe
You're stuck
you
with
can.
Russell.
Maybe you can look at the 2024 draft and maybe bring in his successor and start thinking about the future. But even then, what are you going to do? I mean, Russell Wilson's then a very expensive lawn ornament in the 2025 season. Is that your plan?
How's that going to look for just optics purposes?
So yeah, like you are sort of tied to working with Russell Wilson at the very least in 2023. And surely there's a coach out there who believes in his heart of hearts that he can fix a guy who was on a Hall of Fame trajectory over the last couple of years. But the problem that I keep seeing with this team is that the roster is just not as good as everyone keeps insisting that it is. Like all I heard all offseason was, well, now Russell Wilson's got a deeper wide receiver core and a better offensive line than he ever had in Seattle. Yeah, how'd that work out? The offensive line's a sieve. They haven't. The only significant draft capital they've used on the offensive line in the last handful of years was the first-round pick on Garrett Bowles, who stinks and is always hurt, and the second-round pick on Dalton Reisner. And look, man, I love Dalton Reisner. I have not enjoyed interviews more than I have enjoyed speaking with Dalton Reisner back when he was at Kansas State. I used to look forward to the weeks he was available for media because you could just talk about anything with Dalton. I do think he's a legitimately wonderful guy. There's a reason he's not getting a second contract, man. It is not working for him as it does not look like a starting caliber NFL offensive guard. Those are your 2 high draft picks on that offensive line right now. The line's a sieve. Your weapons, you got a bunch of torn ACLs piling up. Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton never recovered from his. Tim Patrick's recovering from his. You've got a defense that, okay, yeah, they've put up some numbers this year until the quit fest that was on Christmas on Sunday, but they got one good pass rusher. And also Randy Gregory, who you owe $75 million to, and disgraced himself in the franchise by trying to start a fight and bragging about it at the end of that game on Sunday. So, yeah, you're in a really bad spot. That's not a very talented roster. It's not a very talented roster. And even if you fix Russell Wilson, are you catching the Chiefs or the Chargers in the short term? I don't think you are. It's going to take patience. There is no quick fix. There is a desire in Denver to get back to Super Bowl glory, and I do not blame any fan or the organization for having that desire. But you got to understand, they got to crawl before they can walk, and they've been trying to run the Boston Marathon before they can walk.
It just always baffles me, and I'm just always amused at what Denver does, because I was mentioning this before you got on, Dan, and I think this is one of the other true marks, and we're discussing a little bit. Dysfunctional organizations also have owners that get too involved, and now it looks like George Penner might be already moving. Greg Penner, pardon me.
George Payton.
Greg Penner. Yeah. That's not going to be confusing until George Payton's out of a job. It's one of the things where it's just, he's already talking about how, the new head coach is going to answer to him. And it looks like he's already sticking his claws and everything. That feels like even a more backwards way for this organization to move going forward.
And Bronco fans are psyched about this. Like,
they are.
My whole timeline is, this is Greg Penner's team. He's putting a foot down and he's putting a line in the sand. What are Greg Penner's football bona fides? He has none. What are Greg Penner's business bona fides? He married well.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about with Greg Penner. He married well.
Good. It was great for him to marry so well, to get all the money that he now has to be able to buy a football team. But my bigger point was always this: think about every team that you intimately know of their owner and what their owner wants to do to their team, or any of them ran well. Any team with an owner deep into the weeds of what the team wants to do, or any of them ran well and successful.
Yeah, we never have heard ever from Clark Hunt in regards to a personnel decision, right?
Clark Hunt, I hear about Clark Hunt maybe twice a year.
Yeah.
Twice a year.
He does a couple of press conferences and he talks about, like, parking.
Yeah, and then he goes back to Dallas with his oil money and does nothing.
Yeah, where are you having training camp?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll see you at the home games from your suite.
He lets Brett Veach and Andy Reid run his team, and he just says, go nuts. Meanwhile, like Las Vegas, I think, is a great example. Mark Davis is all over that team and what they do. When was the last time Vegas was properly run? Would be a word you describe.
Dallas. Look at Dallas. Look at the Jerry Jones years and what those have been.
The most known owner in Jerry Jones. That Dallas team has been run well in decades. It's a terrible sign. I don't know what Denver's going to do going forward, but they're
going to finish in third place a lot, maybe fourth. Depending on what Vegas decides to do, if they decide to tear it down, try and find a new quarterback after this season, which is possible.
It could be. I mean, Derrick Carr went full Derrick Carr on Christmas Eve against Steelers.
Boy, did he ever. Although it was written in the stars. Like, my dad's a Steeler fan. I watched a game with him. He said they're not losing this game. They're not losing.
No.
They're not losing 2 days after Franco Harris died on the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception. They are not losing. No. And it took me like 4 quarters until I realized, oh, right. Like, man, if their running back named Harris scored the game-winning touchdown.
Great.
It felt like it was written in the stars.
Right there.
No, it was George Pickens who did it instead. But no, another blown lead, another collapse by the Raiders. And they are who they are. And the Broncos are a lot closer to that than they are to the Chiefs and the Chargers. And you don't sprint your way out of that deficit. You've got to claw your way back little by little, brick by brick. And we'll see. We'll see how much football Greg Penner understands, I guess.
Yeah, we truly will. Let's go to some actual on-the-field parts of some football that happened this weekend. We'll start with the Chiefs. They took on your Seattle Seahawks.
They did.
In the matchup on Saturday.
I didn't enjoy that one as much as you did, I don't think.
Probably not. I feel like you and I had a very different vibe watching that game on Saturday, maybe a little bit different emotions. Watching this Chiefs defense, and I guess also from a perspective of knowing more about what that Seattle offense is capable of, how impressed were you with the Chiefs defense after, they've been the butt of the joke for 3 straight games, and then they came out, and if anything, they hit Seattle hard.
Effort level was excellent. Tackling was probably better than it's been all season. George Karlaftis, I think, is getting better week by week, really starting to hit his stride as a rookie, which is what you really want to see from a first-round pick as they round the corner November, December, their rookie season. You want to see them start to hit a stride, and I think George Karlaftis is doing that as we speak. The Seahawks problem was pretty glaring right off the rip. They have one NFL wide receiver on that team. They have a bunch of USFL guys lining up next to DK Metcalf. I mean, like, look, Laquan Treadwell hasn't gotten
Stone
open.
Hands Treadwell out there.
Hasn't gotten open on his own since before he snapped his ankle in half against Alabama when he was in college. I don't even know who else they were playing at wide. I mean, Marquise Goodwin playing with one hand. Like, it was bad. And guys couldn't get open. And so I don't put a lot of blame on Geno Smith. I know there's a lot out there. Well, Geno's who we thought he was. No, when he has weapons, he's played just fine. Like, he had one viable guy to throw to. And the running game for Seattle actually had a little more juice than I expected. I mean, if you want to point to a negative, or if you want to be nitpicky about the Chiefs, it's that they let Kenneth Walker and the Seahawks running game get going a little more than they had in the last couple of weeks. But I thought a lot of that happened when you've already got a 14-point lead. When you got a 14-point lead at home in the second half and it's cold, fine, go ahead and run the ball. Do what you got to do. You can have a little bit of this. But I thought it was a pretty encouraging game all the way around for the Chiefs defense. And the two things that were most encouraging, number one, again, the tackling, and number two, they were +1 in the turnover department. You win the turnover battle as the Chiefs, you're going to be really hard to beat, because losing the turnover battle has been their bugaboo throughout the season.
Funny enough, Jake and I talked about this a lot. Jake was always, every week was like, just don't do turnovers, don't turnovers. And I told Jake, the first time I'll believe the Chiefs can play a game without turning a ball over when I finally see it. Well, good job.
They did it.
Good job.
I mean, they were not the most aggressive they've ever been. And some of that's the weather, and some of that's, you jump out to a 17-3 halftime lead. You don't need to, put your foot on the opponent's throat in the second half when it's 12 degrees. Like, there's only but so much a comeback was really possible. You would have liked to have seen the Chiefs offense be better, but they were safer with the football. And really, we were a couple of drop passes away from that being probably a 20, 25-point win.
Yeah, I'm with you. There were some drops on some big plays that could have definitely led that scoring to be so much more
uncharacteristic, and the kind of thing that you can say, well, it's Alaska degrees outside. That'll happen.
And that's actually I wanted to get to with the way the Chiefs offense did kind of have one of their slower. They still scored 4 points. It's weird to say an offense had kind of an off day when they scored 24 points, but it did feel that way. Would you think that is anything Seattle did defensively to really change it, or would it be it is Alaska temperatures out here. The ball is basically a slippery rock out there, not the university, but the type of object. Do you think that was more of it, just kind of a weather thing that led to the Chiefs offense being a little bit off?
Yeah, 100%. I really think it was all weather. I don't think the Seahawks had much, if anything, to do with it. They were a little better rushing the passer. They were a little more aggressive in blitzing and trying to get an extra man home. And they had a little bit of success flushing Mahomes. They sacked him a couple times, but no, I don't. I think that was an okay game by Seattle's pretty low defensive standards. But for the most part, when I watched the Chiefs, I felt like, most of the things that plagued them were things that you could fairly say were A, about the weather, and B, about just the game situation. Let's you're up 17-0 late first half. Let's just get out of here with this win. And they did.
Getting close to where we're going to need to end up taking a break here, Dan, but I did want to get your thoughts, since it's something that I'll be going in deeper here on the rest of the show. I meant to get to it earlier, but Tua Tagovailoa is back in the concussion protocol. And more importantly, it looks like he potentially played the second half against that Packers game with the concussion, which if so, that's maybe 2 games now where he's played with a concussion in a football game. Just what do you make, if you have any thoughts on how Miami's been handling what seems like a bad concussion protocol for them, or just where does this fault seem to be with Tua specifically, who seems to just, no one's protecting him from himself, it seems, this season?
Yeah, that's kind of how it feels, right? And some of that, I mean, most of that's got to fall on the head coach, got to fall on Mike McDaniel. He's got to do a better job looking out for his players, 100%. Somebody's got to intervene in Tua's best interest. I mean, if it were me, an easy thing for me to say, because I'm not paid millions of dollars to make these decisions, but if it were me, he wouldn't play again this year. I would have no problem
I'm with
saying,
you.
look, man, 3 concussions in one season.
You're done.
We're going to sit you down. We got 2 games left. I mean, they can make the playoffs without him. They can run the ball, and they've got an offense that's starting to malfunction because teams are kind of onto it, their passing game anyway. But they run the ball, play good defense, they can still sneak into the playoffs. But that's why I'm afraid that they won't be acting in his best interest, because right now the best interest of the Dolphins and the best interest of Tua Tagovailoa are not the same.
Yeah, they truly aren't. I'll be interested to see what's going to be going with that going forward. All right, Dan, it's just you on 5-8 Sports Talk today. What we got coming up?
We're going to talk to Matt Verderam from Fansided at 3:30. Michael Swain of Fog.net will join us at 4:30. We're going to recap the NFL weekend that was. And in the 5 o'clock hour, I'm going to talk a lot about what we just talked about, the Nathaniel Hackett firing in Denver and what that means for the AFC West.
Well, we got all that more coming up here later today on 5-8 WIBW. Dan, thanks for dropping in.
My pleasure.
We'll take a time out. We got the 2 o'clock hour coming up next. Welcome back into the final hour of Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW. Fulton Caster with you riding solo today as Jake is, I'm not going to say enjoying as much because it's a travel day for the most part. But Jake is having his last day of his Christmas vacation. He'll be back tomorrow. Before Jake goes on a much more extended vacation, that's just a little heads up. You're about to be seeing a lot of just me and then a lot extra of Kyle for about the next week and a half or so after tomorrow. Jake has a nice long vacation lined up, which means a lot of work for yours truly, but we got a lot of great stuff coming up here in the sports world here in the next week and a half. So honestly, he couldn't have not picked a better time. If he was going to do it in the winter, he picked the right kind of time in the winter to be able to head out. So it'll be a lot of me and a lot of Kyle coming up for the next week and a half. But Jake will be back tomorrow for a brief interlude before he heads off yet again. Then he'll be back after the new year when things change up. We enter 2023. I want to thank Dan for hopping on for a crosstalk. Remember, you can see Dan as he will do 580 Sports Talk solo today as Brendan Dorzinski wraps up his holiday plans as well. Dan will be solo on 580 Sports Talk today from 3 to 6, happening right after I am done here on Mic'd Up. So if you feel like, stay tuned. Hear what Dan has to say. It is an enjoyable time to listen to Dan. He jokes about me, about technically we are foisting him upon you, and we are, like, not even a joke, we are foisting him upon you all whenever we hang out and see all these different things, and we bring him for crosstalk, much like they foist myself or Jake upon their listeners, because, you know, there's not an exact same listenership we share. We share most of the listenership, but some of you can only listen earlier in the afternoon here, some of you can only listen later. It's vice versa. Overall, the point is, I recommend it. Listen to Dan, too. We're all great, and we do some great work here at the 580 Sports team. Coming up here in the 2 o'clock hour to finish things off, we're going to discuss some Big 12 basketball hoops. Conference play begins on Saturday. There are just a few games left to wrap up non-conference play for the Big 12. And we're going to look at just how deep this Big 12 conference is this year. We talk about it every year. Big 12 is the best conference. Big 12 is a deep conference. Well, once again, we can really look at the numbers that show how deep of a conference it is. And then I want to also compare to other we usually call the Power Five. Well, this time we'll call the Big Five, the major conferences, if you will, here in college basketball. We'll look at some of that as well. We'll play a little odds makers. Kyle will join me for that coming up here in the 2 o'clock hour. And then we'll wrap things off, taking one last look at the Chiefs and the Seahawks game from back on Christmas Eve and get some final thoughts on how well the Chiefs play, particularly on defense in that matchup. As always, you can join in on the Big O Irish text line, 785-272-9429, or on YouTube. We are live on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, Sports on 580. You can find the live stream of this show and a live stream of 580 Sports Talk. And you can also rewatch any shows that you missed. If you like going back and watching some, just needing some extra audio fodder or want to see some of the silly things we say, you can rewatch all of that on our YouTube page, Sports on 580. You also see all of our instant reactions to different Chiefs games, Washburn games, KU, K-State, all of that's on there as well. You can catch all of that right there in one central area on our YouTube page. So please feel free to check that out. You can also join the show by hopping in on the comment section of our live YouTube streams as well. But to kick off this hour here of Mic'd Up, this final hour, Big 12 basketball conference play begins on Saturday for the Kansas Jayhawks. They begin conference play in Lawrence as they take on the Oklahoma State Cowboys on Saturday. And for Kansas State, they take on the Mountaineers of West Virginia. I will double check that I'm giving you false information. I am saying both of these things off the top of my head because I'm like 99% sure I'm right, but I want to, 100% sure. Yes, West Virginia, K-State, that'll be this Saturday. That is a 6 o'clock tip in Bramlage Coliseum. KU and Oklahoma State coming up on Saturday. That is a 1 o'clock tip on CBS. K-State and West Virginia. This will be, prepare your groans now, on ESPN Plus. I know some of you don't like it. It's here to stay. Let's just all learn to live with it. Or if you don't want to watch on ESPN Plus, tickets are still available to go see K-State and West Virginia coming up on Saturday. West Virginia now a ranked team. They're 24th in the nation with the newest polls. And that's a great segue into just how deep this Big 12 conference is. First off, here are the ranked teams in the Big 12. KU, 4th. They are the highest ranked Big 12 team. Then you got Texas. They are 6th. Baylor is 12th. You have TCU at 18th. And West Virginia at 24th. Those are your ranked Big 12 teams: Kansas, Texas, Baylor, and West Virginia, and TCU. But this stat was thrown out earlier today. Earlier today, I was also looking through some KenPom ratings myself. KenPom is kind of the preeminent statistical thing that's used when it comes to college basketball nowadays. I reference it for pretty much everything. It's a great statistical model, in my opinion, used by Ken Pomeroy, who designed it. For me, it's a great model because it does a great job of predicting how good teams will be. It is not just a victim of, oh, you've played really well recently or you've played bad teams and so your stats are inflated. It is a great predictor of things for even teams that are, their record is really good, but they might be rated lower on KenPom because the numbers don't like them, or at least the advanced analytics and predictive numbers. So that's why I personally like KenPom. It's one of the ones I will forever reference. You and me reference it a lot here in the Big 12 basketball season. But KenPom has 9 of 10 Big 12 teams in the top 50 at over 360 college basketball teams. KU is 5th. Texas is 6th. Baylor is 17th. West Virginia is 20th. Oklahoma State is 30th. Oklahoma is 32nd. Texas Tech is 33rd. TCU is 38th. And Iowa State is 46th. Which means, yes, K-State is that one team outside the top 50. But where are the Wildcats, you might ask yourself? Well, I have an answer for you to answer that question, visible person talking to me. K-State is 52nd in KenPom. So if you say, oh, the Big 12 is 9 of their 10 in the top 50, K-State's 52nd in KenPom. This is arguably the deepest conference in college basketball. And really only one conference is able to put up even a snuff of a fight. Because I decided, as I looked a little bit deeper at this as well, to discuss just how good this Big 12 conference is. Here are the other 4 big conferences, major conferences. The SEC, 8 of their 14 teams are in the top 50. That's one more for the Big 12 than the SEC, and the SEC has more options to choose from. The Pac-12, 4 of their 12 teams are in the top 50. More than double for the Big 12, and they have 2 less teams. For the ACC, what used to be the one always talked about as one of the best college basketball conferences in the country, only 5 of their 15 are in the top 50. The Big 10 is the only team I am willing to hear an argument for because I will give the Big 10 credit. The Big 10 has 12 of their 14 teams inside the top 50 of Ken Pomeroy's rankings. That is very good. The lowest of those 12 is Michigan at 40th. Michigan, Northwestern, Michigan State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Penn State, Illinois, Rutgers, Maryland, Indiana, Ohio State, and then their highest ranked is Purdue at 7th. Those are the 12 Big 10 teams in the top 50, which is very nice and gives them, in my opinion, a fighting chance here. Now, I'd also like to add a majority of those Big 10 teams that are in the top 50 of the KenPom are all roughly in the same area the majority of the Big 12 teams are. So there's an argument of if you want to go, yeah, they have more. Well, it's like, yes, they have more, but those more are all the same level as what the Big 12 has. But then I add this, because if K-State, the 10th team in the Big 12, at 52nd, in theory, that means K-State at 52nd is the worst team in the Big 12. There are air quotes on that for those of you listening. I am not insulting K-State. I want to make that very clear. But they are technically the worst Big 12 team at 52nd. Well, that's still a hell of a fight for dealing with the worst team. Meanwhile, the 2 worst teams in the Big 10, Nebraska, who K-State beat the snot out of. Nebraska's 89th in KenPom, not good. And then more importantly, and also for Nebraska, that 89th puts them on the likes of Syracuse, Nevada, Drake, and BYU. And then a few spots out of Wichita State. But then if we want to get real specific, the worst Big 10 team is Minnesota. Cue Joe Biden, Minnesota gif. Minnesota's 197th in KenPom. Some teams around Minnesota at 197th. The Midshipmen of Navy. High Point. I can't even make a joke on their mascot because I don't know what it is. St. Thomas, same thing. Can't make a joke when I don't know what your mascot is. And then Siena, whose mascot is the St. Bernard. I don't know what they're officially called, but all I know is the St. Bernard, so I'll call them the Siena Good Boys. Those are the teams around Minnesota. So that's kind of my point. I will hear an argument if anyone wants to tell me the Big Ten is a better basketball conference than the Big 12. I will slightly hear it because, yes, by virtue of being a bigger conference, they have more teams. And I will say 12 of their 14, a good percentage, are in the top 50 of KenPom. That I will also add yet again, a majority of those 12 are all around the same range of the mid-level Big 12 teams. So I think on quality, they're all really similar. But I also add, Big Ten teams, you get to play Minnesota and Nebraska. You get off nights. Playing Minnesota qualifies as an off night when you're playing the 197th team in KenPom. An off night in the Big 12 is playing Kansas State, which is not an off night. Like I've discussed at length, the thing that worries me for Kansas State, and we're going to look at it more as we go into conference play, is K-State's half-court offense. That worries me. That does. I worry that facing these really good Big 12 teams with some better defenses, that they might get stymied a little bit, and that's where the losses will start to pile up. I don't know if that will happen, but that's been my worry. But as I have said all year, K-State's defense is really damn good. They defend their tail off. They are long. They are athletic. They play hard defensively. They have had what? 1 game, 2 games this year where you would say they didn't play well defensively? Like, that's probably it. They've played well defensively in so many games this year. I mean, Butler was one of the games they didn't play well defensively, and Nevada. Butler and Nevada are the 2 games I would say K-State did not really play their best defensively. And they won one of those games in overtime when they dropped 97. And they lost the other when they had their one loss to Butler. But overall, they defend their tails off, and that is what's going to make them such a pain for every team in the Big 12. Every Big 12 team is going to play K-State, and they're going to be put through 40 minutes of hell by that defense. K-State is going to lose some games in the Big 12, and they're going to be low-scoring games that K-State's going to lose because they just could not get enough buckets in transition, and their half-court offense was stymied. That's going to happen. At the same time, though, I would put money on it that K-State will be competitive in nearly every game this year in the Big 12. Maybe Texas and Baylor and KU blow out K-State once in their 2 meetings. Maybe. If K-State walks into Lawrence and KU runs out the score on them, no one should be surprised, nor should they be disappointed. This is K-State's first year under Jerome Tang with a team that is still learning how to play basketball together because they all came together in August. So that's my thing where we discuss this and we always talk about how good the Big 12 as a conference is. As we move into conference play, I just wanted to take a minute and realize truly what it means to be this good and put it in numbers, because we always have these debates of, and this goes beyond college basketball. We always debate about, what's the best conference, who's the best teams. X being better than Y is an integral central pillar of sports debate. It's what we do. Like, I'm a victim of it. I exploit it for content. I'm doing it right now because it's what we do. It's what we love to do here in sports is we want to find ways to prove X is better than Y or Y is better than X. And when it comes to the Big 12, if you're one of those people who wants to believe the Big 12 is the best basketball conference, but you're going to be out there on the internet, you're going to see people say, the Big 10's better. This is where it comes to. The Big 12, every single one of their teams could hang with those 12 teams that are in the top 50 of KenPom. for the Big Ten. By the numbers. They can all hang. I mean, you think about it. Michigan's 48th. K-State's 52nd. I would say K-State can hang with Michigan. It would be tough. Hunter Dickinson to be a problem, but I'd be surprised if K-State can hang with Michigan. Northwestern's 45th. Michigan State's 44th. I'd say K-State could probably try and hang with those, but it might be a little bit tough. But what's more important in that matchup? TCU's right there with those teams. TCU's 38th. They're better than those three teams. And then they're right there. Iowa's 37th. TCU can hang. Wisconsin, Penn State at 35 and 34. TCU can hang. And Oklahoma, Texas Tech are right in the middle of Illinois and Penn State. You go to Maryland and Rutgers at 22 and 23. West Virginia's 21. They're right there. And then they can also play ball with Indiana at 19th. Baylor at 17th. They can hang with Ohio State and Indiana. Then you go to their best team is Purdue at 7th. KU and Texas are both ranked above them. And then I bet Baylor could try to put up a fight against Purdue. That's my overarching point when it comes to this Big 12 conference, because I know as we go, there's going to be pundits and whatever who make all these comments about the conference and what conference is truly the best. And it's probably going to be between the Big 12 and the Big 10. Every single team in the Big 12 can hang with, in my opinion, all those 12 in the Big 10. And unlike the Big 12, the Big 10 has dead weight. It's two teams, but it's two teams of dead weight. Nebraska and Minnesota are dead weight to a basketball conference. The Big 12 is none. Like, K-State is technically, and I'm really trying to emphasize that word here, technically the worst team in the Big 12. By numbers and metrics and advanced analytics and yada, yada, yada. They are still a really damn fine basketball team. Which I will add, just as, you know, K-State and KU are teams around here. I just want to point out, that's a credit to what Jerome Tang has done in 1 year. He's got that team playing at a level that I did not think was possible. I didn't. And that's not any bias from a KU grad. That's none of that. That is just, it is hard to get a team ready when it's built so much of the transfer portal because so many players transferred out. But he's made it work. He's got this team buying in. He's establishing a great culture at Kansas State. And if that's the worst team in the Big 12, well, folks, get ready. Conference play begins on Saturday. There are 4 non-conference games left for the Big 12. Tonight, Texas plays Texas A&M Commerce, and Texas Tech plays South Carolina State. TCU will play Central Arkansas tomorrow, and Baylor will play Nicholls. Those are your final 4 non-conference games for the Big 12 this year, outside of the Big 12 SEC Challenge in January, which I truly hate, because why is there a non-conference game in the middle of conference season? I will die on that hill. It is stupid. It is ridiculous. Non-conference play, conference play. They're fully separated. Why do we play the Big 12 SEC Challenge? What? Well, okay, we play it. Good. Why in the world do we not play at the end of December? Let conference season be conference season. Just let it be a thing. I'm sorry for getting so angry, but it bothers me. It's a stupid thing to get bothered over, and I probably shouldn't get as annoyed as I do over it, but God, it drives me crazy. Partly because then I can't say the words non-conference season is over and the non-conference schedule is done, because technically every Big 12 team will have one more non-conference game to play in the middle of conference season. Drives me nuts. Also drives me nuts that KU plays Kentucky every single time. Very at the matchups. I'd have to look at the numbers. I looked this up one time. KU's played Kentucky nearly every year of the Big 12 SEC Challenge. It's always KU, Kentucky. Been a couple years of KU, Tennessee. 1 year we were blessed with KU, Texas A&M. That was a fun, varied year. And also all the Big 12 matchup, which makes it more fun too. Either way, circle back to the main point here, just with all this. Conference play begins on Saturday, which with the Big 12 and the fact that we follow the Big 12, which is, in my opinion, and backed up low by statistics, the best conference in college basketball. This is where the fun begins. We got a couple great matches for the local teams coming up on Saturday. KU, Oklahoma State. That's going to be fun. You think about Oklahoma State being like, kind of. Oklahoma State is 30th in Ken Pom. They can play ball. Mike Boynton's boys can play ball. Like KU, Oklahoma State, that's going to be fun. West Virginia coming in and taking on Kansas State on Saturday at Bramlage. That's going to be fun. West Virginia is ranked now. This is a West Virginia team that before the season started, I didn't know how good they were going to be. But Huggy Bear's got those boys playing well. This is going to be entertaining basketball to be played. If you just do nothing else, if you're not a big college basketball person or watch some of it, I implore you, if you do anything for college basketball, just watch the Big 12 night in, night out. Because Saturday's slate to kick off Big 12 play is going to be very entertaining. Of course, you got Oklahoma State, Kansas. You got Kansas State, West Virginia. You got Texas Tech and TCU. Texas Tech and TCU. That's 33rd versus 38 in Ken Palm. That's going to be a doozy. That's going to be a banger of a matchup at 11 a.m. in Fort Worth between Texas Tech and TCU. You got Texas and Oklahoma at 1 o'clock on Saturday. That's the 6th in Ken Palm, Texans, 32nd Oklahoma. That, in theory, should be more of a potential blowout territory. I bet that game is close down there in Norman. They'll find a way to make that fun because Porter Moser's team plays hard. Those boys play hard for Porter Moser. It'd be fantastic. And then at 1 o'clock as well, you got Baylor at Iowa State. That is a Baylor team that is 17th in Ken Palm and an Iowa State team that is 46th. Another chance where you should say, man, that's probably going to be a blowout. DJ Olsenberger got those Iowa State boys playing hard. Like, look at all the records. The worst record in non-conference play for a team this year is Oklahoma State at 8-4. They have the worst non-conference record of any Big 12 team coming up this year after all the non-conference is said and done. They have one truly bad loss when they lost to Southern Illinois. Won't deny. They lost to the Salukis. You can't do that. You can't do that. Lost to UCF in overtime. Not great, but it was a close game. Lost to UConn. UConn's one of the best teams in the entire country. And they lost to Virginia Tech. But they'll still play hard. It'll be fun. I'll be watching some of the college basketball coming up on Saturday. We have a texter that makes a fantastic note, and texter, your point is correct. The college football playoff semifinals are Saturday. They are. I'm not telling you to watch Big 12 basketball over the college football playoff semifinals. I wouldn't do that. I'll be watching the college football playoff semifinals when I can. My overarching point, texter, as you make up a great point to point those out, are Saturday. One, there is a great Big 12 basketball slate coming up on Saturday, but overall, enjoy it through the year. Watch it when you can as the year goes on and we progress into the new year and we progress through the college basketball season, because night in and night out, the Big 12 is the most, usually, more often than not, very entertaining product. This Saturday, they have competition because they have the college football playoff games going on, but overall, it is usually a very, very good time. And for those of you that do care and do want to know about what is coming up for the college football playoffs coming up, because also we have K-State as well in the Sugar Bowl on Saturday. That is an 11 a.m. kick for Alabama and Kansas State in the Sugar Bowl. And then at 3 o'clock, we have TCU, Michigan. And at 7 o'clock, we have Ohio State and Georgia. You can mix a little bit of college basketball all around that. I can't lie to you. I'm going to probably have K-State, West Virginia on one of the small screens while I'm watching Ohio State and Georgia. Mainly because probably by the second quarter, that game's going to be boring when Georgia's up by 50 points. Because Georgia plays a different brand of football than anybody else. But text streaming, great point. Cultural playoffs are Saturday. Those are fun to watch. Also, the K-State bowl game on Saturday. But you can bounce everything around. Watch Alabama. For me, I'm going to watch Alabama, Kansas State in the Sugar Bowl. I'll parlay that right into me covering KU basketball coming up on Saturday. Then I'll come home. I'll watch TCU, Michigan. Then I'll watch Ohio State, Georgia. I'm going to have a good time the entire weekend. It's a great sports weekend setting up. But Big 12 basketball is the best basketball that you can watch, the best college basketball you can watch. Numbers back it up. The eye test backs it up. I hope all of you get a chance to watch some very, very good Big 12 basketball coming up this year. We'll take a timeout. When we come back, time for Odds Makers here on Mic'd Up. Time for Odds Makers here on 580 WIBW. I bring back in my good man, Kyle Manthey, to help me out with this today. Kyle, I will lead off with asking you the same thing I often ask Jake this time of the week on a Tuesday afternoon. Kyle, what are the odds the Chiefs get the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs?
I'm going to say we'll go 50-50. I still
50-50,
have
okay.
some belief that they can catch the Bills, because the Bills, they still got the Bengals on the schedule.
Yep.
I'm going to believe that Joe Burrow's powers will extend to beating Buffalo and not just Kansas City.
I can only hope so that our good man Joe Burrow has a little bit of power to do this. It's like I said earlier today to lead off the show. Chiefs fans, you don't have to do it. But I'd recommend being a Bengals fan for this week. Like, this Monday night game coming up here on January 2nd is a massive game for so many things, including the Kansas City Chiefs. Because if the Chiefs win their next 2 games, they will finish the year at 14-3. If the Bills win their next 2 games, they're 14-3. Bills get the 1 seed via the tiebreaker. But the Bills play the Bengals on the road on Monday night. Buffalo right now is a 1-point favorite in that game. It will be a doozy of a matchup. If Cincinnati wins, Buffalo falls from the 1 seed to the 3 seed. And then, as Jake and I have noted all year, if Kansas City gets the 1 seed and you get a 2-3 swing of Buffalo and Cincinnati at the 2 and the 3, they'll play each other more than likely before the AFC Championship game, which means, in theory, you only got to beat one and not both to make it to the Super Bowl, which is the greatest thing. For the odds for me, this speaks to my confidence in Joe Burrow. I'm going to go 60%. I think it's going to be a tough game for Cincinnati on Monday Night Football against the Bills. I'm taking Cincinnati beyond just I want them to win for Chiefs reasons. I really do think they will win that football game because they're playing some great football right now, and being at home, I think on Monday Night helps. Plus, the Bills are not playing their best football as of late. But I go about 60% the Chiefs will get the 1 seed. All they need is to win their final 2 games and have Buffalo lose 1. And Buffalo has a loss potentially awaiting on Monday. And if they beat Cincinnati, my odds would swing dramatically because the Bills end the season at home versus the Patriots. And good Lord, are the Patriots bad. Oh my God, are they bad. But I'd say about 60% for the Chiefs to get the 1 seed.
No faith in Mac Jones to take care of business?
0. Absolutely none. Bubkiss. None of that. No faith in the Patriot way. After what I saw they did against the Las Vegas Raiders, I'll give them credit. They tried to come back against the Bengals. They almost had a chance. Then Ramondre Stevenson fumbled it again, and I just started laughing, chuckling maniacally. It was the greatest thing ever.
Fulton, my odds makers for you. We haven't gotten enough college basketball. What are the odds that the Big 12, the vaunted Big 12, which you just
as I have dubbed them essentially,
what are the odds that they get more than 8 teams in the tournament? I believe in this new iteration of the Big 12 with 10 teams, I think the most they've gotten is 8 teams, which I think it was 2019 was the last time that happened. What are the odds they get to 9? 90% of the conference in the tournament.
Oh my man, that is a tough one. Before I answer that question, before I give you my odds, I have pulled up Joe Lunardi's recent bracketology, which just updated today. Last time we checked this, 9 teams were in. Let's see if 9 teams are in fact still in here. I got Baylor here, Kansas still on the one line. I got Iowa State still in the door. Keep scrolling around here as I look around here. I got Texas still on the door. They're still hanging it. I got Texas Tech in the door. I have Kansas State up to the 9 line. K-State's a 9 seed in this iteration of bracketology. I got Oklahoma in there, and then I got West Virginia in there as well. It looks like that would be... Looks like TCU is not in. Nope, there they are. That is 9 Big 12 teams in Joe Lunardi's recent edition of bracketology. And then, more importantly, in the first 4 outline is Oklahoma State. The odds of this happening are 40% for me. It is hard to get 9 teams from a conference, let alone 9 teams out of 10. Because of the Classic, I think the Big 12 is going to beat up on itself too much. That's my thing with K-State trying to get in, because I think their non-con was very nice. And some of these teams getting wins over SEC teams in the Big 12 SEC Challenge will be important as well. It's doable. It's more doable than I would ever have, really thought to say at this point, that 9 of these teams could get in. But I think it's still averaging about 40% or so, because, man, that's just a lot of teams to get in. But the Big 12 is deep, as I was just saying. This is a very deep conference. But yeah, I'm going to go about 40% is what I'd say.
I want to go a little bit higher. I want to say 50%. I'll go back to 50-50. And I think the difference between some of the past years in the Big 12, where you'll have like 3 teams ranked inside the top 10 consistently, besides KU, if you're a believer in Texas, you could say they're another team, but there's not really like a truly like great team that will give every team L's throughout the conference slate. And so I think they'll get at least 8 for sure. Maybe that's bold. I think they'll get 9, but the 9th will be one of those Tuesday, Wednesday games. But I think they'll get 8 safe in not like a fake first 4 game. I think that's safe to say.
I'm with you. I think you're right in the assessment that the difference this year than years past is there's not, because normally you have KU and Baylor up top who just thrash everybody, and then they hand everyone just L. I think outside of KU, really don't have that. And even KU's shown themselves to have some moments of being kind of more vulnerable than normal. So no, I think your point is very valid, that this just might be a chance for 9 to get in based on the fact of everybody might have like 7 or 8 conference wins, which coupled that with good non-con and everyone kind of right there might actually end itself out to them being able to do what they need to do. One last odd maker for you here, Kyle, here before we head to another break here. We'll go back to the NFL. What are the odds the Jacksonville Jaguars win the AFC South?
I'll say 70%. I believe in the Jaguars now.
Especially now someone's with me.
Especially now that the Titans no longer have Ryan Tannehill. I like Trevor Lawrence. I'll go 70%.
For me, I'm going to go very bold with this take, but the fact that right now these two teams are tied at 7-8, and they play each other in Week 18, and Tennessee has Dallas coming up on the schedule, I'm going to go 90%. I think when these two teams meet in Week 18, Jacksonville's already beaten Tennessee once. I think that Jacksonville's honestly, and I will say this honestly, I think Jacksonville's the better team. Because as I have said, and there's a reason I'd rather face Tennessee than Jacksonville in the playoffs, Jacksonville can at least score. Like, maybe Tennessee's defense is better, and it probably is, especially at different areas. Sure. Tennessee can't score. They cannot find ways to put points on the board, and that's how you win a game. Jacksonville, for all of their faults, and they have some, they can put points on the board. And that is the number one thing that would make me think Jacksonville's the tougher team to face, but also why I'm confident that my earlier regular season prediction of Jacksonville making it to the playoffs and winning their division will come true. I was a big believer early on, and then they tapered off, and I felt like an idiot. Well, they're back, baby. The Jags are fully back, and I fully think that they will win the AFC South coming up this year. That'll do it for odds makers here on Mic'd Up. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, Chiefs and Seahawks will look at the win and how well the defense played in that matchup. Welcome back into Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW as we begin to wrap up the show today. I want to thank you all for joining me, as always, here on this lovely, chilly Tuesday afternoon in the capital city. Not as chilly as it's been. I mean, not taking wind chill into account, we're up to 38 degrees outside. You know, better than -10, what we were last weekend. Which brings me to this. Actually, I didn't think I was going to get into this, but I'm going to now because that sparked a thought in me. So on Saturday, Chiefs and Seahawks. The temperature outside was, 10, probably a lot colder. It was dangerously low temperatures outside on Saturday, where precautions should be taken to avoid exposed skin because it can cause frostbite in certain situations. You should bundle up. the entire Seahawks wide receiver room and other players were warming up shirtless. Which brings me to a larger point. And maybe this is some weird, rando, old man take. I don't understand these whole football players warming up shirtless when it is bone-chillingly cold outside. It is beyond just what Seattle did. There were other guys did it at other times for other games because it was cold across the NFL with that Arctic blast coming through. We've seen in college football guys do it as well. I don't get it. What is the point? What's the point? Seriously. And this isn't I'm bagging on Seattle because they lost and, I'm just trying to, defend my. No, it's none of that. It could have been Seattle against anybody. What's the point? What are you trying to prove by exposing yourself to potential frostbite and freezing your butt off before a game? What is the point? I've never understood this because this is not a this year thing. This is a multi-year thing that we see across the NFL and college football is when games are cold, guys got to warm up in as little clothes as possible. They're rocking their shorts and no shirts on. They're like, oh, it's nothing. It's fine. There's a great video that went around one time of Devontae Smith, wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles, during one of their games that was really cold. And you see Devontae Smith complaining about the cold, be like, man, I need to put a towel on my head to warm my head up. And he's like, oh, someone get me a beanie, get me a big coat. Just do it. Just warm up. Just be warm. Don't act like you're not cold. Don't do it. Like, it makes no unearthly sense. It's a thing that has always annoyed me. It has made no sense because I know the point comes from like, oh, we need to be tough. We're showing we're tough. Cold ain't messing with us. We're tough. Dude, you ain't tough because you acting like you ain't cold. It doesn't show toughness at all. It shows stupidity. It shows you're a moron. That's what, like, this is another one of those things that I get needlessly upset about. I shouldn't be this angry and this hot over it, but it doesn't make sense to me. It's always been one of the stupidest ways to show toughness to me is to pretend you're not cold. No, it's cold. It's very cold outside. It is freezing. You find ways to bundle up and make yourself warm. You find ways to play through the warm weather. You're not impressing anyone at all. I promise you, you are impressing no one. And no one thinks you are tough because you're outside shirtless and -10. I promise you, everyone just looks at you like you're an idiot. I saw that a bunch across the NFL in a bunch of different games on Saturday, and I shook my head. Because it's just stupid. It's silly. They get ESPN tweeting like, oh, man, they're warming up like this. Look at how tough they're. Cold doesn't bother them. No, you're propagating stupidity. You're propagating people acting like morons. In other words, I wish I could say, but the FCC would be really offended if I said them. So the weather brought that in my brain. I had to get that out there, but just it's silly. It's very silly, and don't do that. If you're a football player, be warm while you warm up. Play in what you're playing in. So, Jake, I wish Jake was here for this because Jake has always talked about this. He doesn't get why wide receivers warm up catching passes without pads on. That baffles Jake. He's like, you're not playing the game without your pads on. You're not properly getting loose or getting ready to be in the flow of the game if you're practicing without pads on. Jake and I, because I went to a lot of Washburn games and working with Jake this year. Anytime we saw receivers running without pads on, that man was baffled. He's like, you're not helping anything. You're actually actively not, because he's like, you're not playing like that. I'm not telling, guys to always warm up in full gear, but like the more of your gear you warm up with that you're going to wear in the game, that's actually better for you because you get accustomed to how you're going to feel while going through the flow of the game. It's like, I get Jake's point when he, tells receivers to warm up with pads on. Because I'm like, that's actually true. Your pads affect your catch radius, how much your range of motion is. This has been Fulton ranting about warm-up things that really don't matter. I apologize if anyone gets annoyed by it, but it frustrates me. Sometimes athletes do things to try and show off toughness or try and show off coolness that it just astounds me because it's just stupid, truly. But to the on-the-field pride for the Chiefs and the Seahawks on Christmas Eve, the Chiefs' defensive performance is something I hope we see going forward. When I was talking to Matt Derrick about at the end of the noon hour, we talked about, the tackling, how that was different. He said he talked to Trent McDuffie, about it. And Trent said, part of it was, we knew it was going to be a cold game. We knew it was going to be a game built on toughness, and we needed to be the tougher team. And I've talked about that at length when it comes to this tackling issue for this Chiefs team. It's some of it when I watched it was technique. I've complained about Juan Thornhill a lot in his tackling because he doesn't tackle formally. He just launches his body at people. That's not proper tackling. That's not proper form. But there's also a level of tackling, which is just being tougher than the other guy. You can be all about your form and your technique and make the right contact and have the right stance. But if that guy that you're hitting is tougher than you, he will run through you. Or he might have a better technique or a better angle. But if you are tougher than him, then you can drive him back when he shouldn't be driven back. And so it was nice to see that the Chiefs not only were the tougher team on Saturday when it came to the tackling for their defense, but also that they recognized it, that they recognized that that's something they needed to be. And it's something I hope that they are going forward, because that's kind of one of my biggest worries when they go into the playoffs. I'm not worried about what their eventual first round matchup is. If the playoffs happen today, the Chiefs' first round matchup be against the Miami Dolphins. I wouldn't be worried about that much. And assuming would say, well, Fulton, they have Tyreek Hill, they have Jalen Waddle, they're really fast. If you press those receivers and throw off all the timing, Miami has shown an ability to not play well. They're kind of being figured out a little bit offensively. So that's what Dan even noted. We were chatting a little bit in the during CrossTalk at the bottom of the 1:00 hour. Miami's been figured out a little bit. So I wouldn't be that worried if they played them, right now. Or, let's say the Chiefs do get the 1 seed, and they would, at this point, they'd match with Jacksonville if they're the 1 seed, and everything went chalk. I'm not accounting for upsets here because it's just so hard to predict. Everything went chalk. It'd be Chiefs and Jacksonville in the divisional round. The Chiefs already beaten Jacksonville this year, and it wasn't that hard. If they play a little bit more soundly, it's probably easy again. It's facing either Buffalo or Cincinnati where you get worried. And I would like just this team to play with the defensive toughness against either of those two teams. That's what's important, in my opinion, is the defensive toughness from this team. And that's what I hope we get to see out of the Chiefs going forward. If that's the one thing that stays constant in the Seattle game is the defensive performance, that's what I want to see, because this was, in my opinion, the best tackling day of the year for the Chiefs, because they had a very few missed tackles. And more importantly, guys are being sound with their hitting. They're being aggressive. They're playing fast. They're playing decisively. And they hit guys hard. And they were the tougher, more aggressive team. And that's just what I love to see out of this Chiefs defense, is that they are always the tougher and the more aggressive team going forward. We'll see if that holds coming against Denver on Sunday, but hopefully it's something we get to see a lot more going forward. We'll take one more timeout. We'll wrap things up with the mic drop coming up next. Time for the mic drop here on 580 WIBW. Wrapping things up here on a lovely Tuesday afternoon, and I didn't get into this as much as I thought I would today. There was so much to get to today, but I think it is still important to make it worth noting. Dan and I touched on it a little bit during CrossTalk at the end there. Tua Tagovailoa should not play a single other down for the Miami Dolphins this year. He has now had 3 concussions in a single NFL season. One of them occurred roughly 4 days after his first one. Sometimes you have to save a player from themselves. I get it. Tua wants to be out there. I get it. Tua wants to help his team. They have a chance to go to the playoffs. There's things they want to do. They have goals. They have aspirations. I get that. Nothing is worth the health of that young man. Tua should not play another down, and we need to take a serious, long look at our concussion protocol. If a guy can get a concussion, play an entire half of football, and then be diagnosed and put in the protocol later, and then reports can come out today that say he exhibited no symptoms with which to activate the protocol. We have to do better. If we're going to play football, there's an understanding of head trauma, but there's also an understanding that we can find ways to mitigate risk. We have to do better. The NFL needs to do better at finding ways to protect these players. Injuries are going to happen. Head trauma is going to happen. But we don't have to let it be as blatant as this, where a guy gets a 3rd concussion and played a game again with a concussion. Something needs to be done to protect Tua, and something needs to be done to change things in the NFL. That'll do it for my tip today. We got 580 Sports Talk coming up next.